Hi, welcome to Hey It Gets Better. I'm your host, Katie Watson, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Ellie Austin Williams, who is also known as This Girl Talks Money. Ellie talks about how she actually trained as a lawyer, and while she is grateful for all the things that taught her, she found that it wasn't the right career for her. In this episode, we talk about how you might actually end up somewhere you never thought you would, but that's actually okay. And we also talk about your 20s. What should you actually be doing during your 20s? And now you're an adult, how do you actually make friends? I hope you guys enjoy this episode just as much as I enjoyed recording it. Hi Ellie, welcome to Hey It Gets Better, and thank you for being on my podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if you'd just like to take a second to introduce yourself to the listeners and explain a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Ellie Austin Williams and I'm the founder of This Girl Talks Money, which is a platform that I set up to try and help empower women, young women especially, when it comes to all things financial. And I also write and create content for personal finance brands as well.
Thanks, Ellie. That's super interesting. And one thing that I found quite surprising from when I first spoke to you was that you actually hadn't planned on going down this route.
No, that is very true. I hadn't. I am the epitome of the, I guess, multi-hyphenate, to use Emma Gannon's words. And my career started off in law, so I actually trained, I did all of the law school, I trained as a solicitor, qualified and left, which seems a bit crazy when I think about it sometimes, but I think I knew quite early on that it wasn't the job that I really wanted it to be, and it wasn't the job that was right for me. So I went into marketing, and initially I started off in fitness marketing. So I worked with a lot of boutique gyms to help them to build their presence online particularly. And then what I really liked doing and what I had kind of found my own interest in was personal finance. And I slowly started to move over, and I'm now in a position where pretty much all of what I do for clients and for myself is finance based. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's definitely really cool how you made that switch. And that was a really good sort of overview of your journey until now, where you're launching a great program to support women in their finances. I can imagine that you've had quite a few challenges along the way. And I was wondering if we could just talk about a few of those challenges that you've had to deal with on your career path and the changes you've had in your life.
Yeah, totally. I mean, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I can imagine, it's very, when people ask what's your biggest challenge, or you can be like, well, I've had quite a lot of them. So
yeah.
Should we start with how you decided to move away from law? Because I think law is quite one of those careers that is very prestigious and very admired. I know a lot of friends right now who are going to law school and they're doing amazing stuff, but it must be quite difficult to go through all of that and then decide not to be a lawyer.
Yeah, so I mean that's the thing, like you said, it is, and still to this day I have times when I think, like, did I do all of that for nothing? But I guess what I have learned is that like, that looking back and the what ifs aren't helpful for anyone. But also just reminding myself that obviously, like, retrospectively, things look very different. And I was really unhappy when I was there. I mean, from a personal perspective, but also professional, I just did not have a good time. It's a very intense environment. And actually, I saw some statistics the other week which was talking about the fact that lawyers have the worst mental health of all of the industries. And that does not surprise me at all, which is quite scary, really. Just because it's an environment which is so intense. And if you think about how lawyers work, and it's the same for other professional services, but I think in law it's particularly bad. You are literally paid, like, clients pay for your time. So money is time, and it means that for firms to make as much money as possible, they need you to work as many hours as possible, and that is just embedded in the culture. So the concept at a lot of big firms, particularly of work life, is just non-existent. And it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a really big challenge, because I think what people want nowadays is very different to what people expected their careers to look like kind of 20, 30 years ago. But I mean, people still go into it with, I think, a kind of rose tinted view of what it's like. And I definitely did. I went into it thinking, oh, I could do this. I'll be good at this. It'll pay me good money. And it does. But there's a reason. Like, there's a reason why lawyers get paid what they pay. They're paid because, like, they give up a lot. And the people running these firms, like, they take their phones absolutely everywhere. Like, you don't sleep without it. You don't go on holiday without it. Like, your clients can get you wherever you are in the world. So you are on all the time. And I just think that the lifestyle that I had envisaged when I was there and I saw what the reality was, there was just this massive disconnect. And a lot of people, it works for them. But I think increasingly people are just not willing to sacrifice what it takes.
Yeah, I think especially in law particular, there is that sort of glamorized image of it. When you say, I'm a lawyer, I immediately think of Suits.
Yeah, totally.
Which, and from the sounds of things, it's nothing like Suits.
No.
It's a lot tougher.
Yeah, it is. I mean, law on TV looks great, but it's like most things, I wanted to be a spy when I was younger because I watched Spooks, and I thought it was literally like the coolest thing ever. And then, like, as I grew up, I realized, like, maybe actually I don't want to, like, constantly be, like, living in fear. Yeah, it's the classic. Like, this is what it looks like. It all looks really shiny. And don't get me wrong, some people love doing what they do. I'm just in a position where I am surrounded by quite a lot of lawyers. Still, just because a lot of my friends are, my boyfriend is. And I can, I mean, if people are thinking I want to do it for the money, like, it's not worth it.
That's really good, though, that you say you're still surrounded by lawyers, because you've sort of, you yourself, you discovered you weren't suited to it. It didn't make you happy, but you still got to, you still are friends with the people you're friends with, and you still are a little bit in touch with the law world. Like, does that feel quite nice? Or
yeah, I mean, again, don't get me wrong, there are some major benefits to doing what I did and to doing the training. Like, one being, like you said, to a degree, the prestige. Like, people take you more seriously, especially trying to do what I'm doing and setting up, like, a business relatively young, in my 20s. I know that's getting more and more common, but I think when people realise that, like, you trained and are a qualified lawyer, people do take you a little bit more seriously. Also, like, it's tough. The studying. So I didn't study law. I did law conversion, and you study so much in such a short amount of time, that your ability to, like, learn and to, like, retain information and to digest information, is pretty good. So those skills are things that, like, I still use constantly. And also just the on the job experience. So there are a lot of, I guess, overlaps between business, law and finance. And really, like, what I'm doing now, there's a lot of things that I learned whilst I was working as a lawyer that have helped me. So prime example are things like tax. Like, I spent 6 months doing tax law, which sounds thrilling, I'm sure. Actually, it's super interesting. If you're like me and you like you like math, not maths, but you like how things work, like the economy, business, all of that. That all ties into corporate tax, and so things like yesterday when the budget came out, and there was the big announcement about all these changes to finances, to stamp duty, and all of that, to me, is not that difficult, and I wouldn't have had that if it wasn't for the law. So there is definitely, like, a bigger picture advantage. And I think a lot of people would probably agree that when you change career, you do actually have like a different perspective on things. Like, obviously you can look at things and say, oh, I wish I had just started this earlier and I'd have saved myself some time. But I think a lot of experience is like you have to have lived it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
In that perspective, like I don't regret doing what I did.
It sounds like it has really helped you, and I think it just highlights how none of us know where we're going to end up.
Totally.
And really, all we can do is make the decisions in the moment. I think what you said earlier about how the ifs, they don't really help anyone, that's so true, because I think a lot of people find themselves in that sort of mindset sometimes where like, oh, if I just did this or I didn't do that, but you can't change the past, and you can just see what you've actually gained from it. And it sounds like you've taken a really positive attitude towards it.
Yeah, it hasn't always like been that easy. I mean, if you'd asked me maybe like a year or two ago, well, like a year ago, I would probably have been at a different stage. But it all is part of your story and part of your journey. And like you said, we never know where we're going to end up. And did I ever envisage when I was at law school that I would be doing what I'm doing now? Absolutely not. I would have taken myself a lot of stress doing those exams. But yeah, like I'm grateful for where I am now and for the path that has got me here.
Yeah, I think those exams were definitely tough. I know a few friends who have just graduated and they're going to go do the conversion. And it sounds really hard. I mean, I know a few of them will be listening. Don't know if you have any advice for them.
Honestly, it's actually, it's intense, but it's good. I really enjoyed my time doing the conversion, particularly because you get to do such a broad spectrum of subjects. Like, it covers all of the 7 core areas of law. So even though I went into commercial, when you're studying, you get to study criminal, and it's so interesting. So there are some really great parts, even if they're not relevant to what you then go on to do. And actually, I mean, again, studying is one of those things that, I mean, you can tell me how you feel now, but when you're kind of doing it and you're coming to the end of it, you're desperate for it to be over. And obviously, as soon as you start work, you're like, oh gosh, I wish I was back studying. The way that the world works. So actually having that extra time studying is really beneficial, I think. And you have your life to work, so just enjoy being a student for a bit longer would be my advice.
Thanks for that, Ellie. That's actually quite something I've heard quite a few times, is just enjoy being a student, because you can't ever get, once you start working, you never get back to that.
Yeah, the time, that's the thing. Like there's it's back to that always this time money trade-off. And you spend most of your life working for money, but as a student you maybe don't have as much money, but you do have time.
Yeah, time is really valuable. I've had an abundance, like most people, like most students, definitely an abundance of it right now.
Yeah.
But you realise how precious it is when your to-do list starts building up and you're like, okay, I've got a lot to do.
Yes.
Where has all the time gone?
Totally. But then, I mean, you also appreciate your time, I think, a lot more when you have less of it. So it works both ways.
Yeah, definitely. And so you didn't immediately go straight into This Girl Talks Money, did you? Because you also started a startup with your best friend, right?
Yes, I did. So I joined a startup. And this, I think, is probably quite an important part of like my journey, in the sense that it's all very well for me saying like, oh, I just left law because I didn't really like it. Like, I had an alternative, which I think is a massive privilege, in the sense that a lot of people don't have another option. Like, a lot of people stay because they don't know what else to do and they don't know where else to go. Whereas I had a viable option of something that I could do straight out of leaving. So when I made the decision to leave, I knew what I was going to do and I knew where I was going. And it was still a big decision, but it was one of those decisions, like I was making that decision at 25. And I knew that if I didn't do it then, there would never be a time that I would leave and just give it a go. Um, and ultimately, it didn't work out. Like, that business doesn't exist in the same form that it did when I joined. And that's for like various reasons. But if I hadn't left then, would I still be doing law? Probably miserably. Yes, I think so. Um, so I don't want to I don't want to give the impression that, it's as straightforward as like, oh yeah, just quit something that you don't like. Like, it really isn't. And to get into the position where I left, I had spent a year, well, basically 2 years, all of my spare time, my evenings when I wasn't at the office, and my weekends, I was working like for free to help my friend to build this business. So I had put in like the hours and the time and the dedication to then be in a position where she says, do you want to come and join?
Yeah, I think that's really important to say, because it's not like you rocked up one day and you were like, I'm going to quit.
Yeah.
But you actually spent a lot of time, and it sounds like a lot of dedication went into helping your friend create this business.
Yeah, definitely. And ultimately, yeah, she gave me an opportunity to get out of law, but I also kind of had helped her to get it to where it was. So it was very much like a mutual benefit setup. So that was definitely the reason. And it was one of those opportunities, like I said, that if I didn't take it then, I would have just got too comfortable, I think, in the job, that taking that risk would not have been particularly appealing at any later stage. So it was like, let's take it now. I was young enough, didn't have any responsibilities. Like, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. And I kind of assumed that if it didn't work out, I'd go back to law, which has not happened.
Yeah, that's so good. And I think, I don't know when you're young, when you are like, because I'm in my 20s, I feel like I should be sort of setting the groundwork for some sort of amazing career, working really hard in a big company. But then at the same time, I also am very aware that once I am a bit older and I have a lot more responsibilities with a mortgage, and then maybe like even having to pay for kids because they are very expensive, I've heard.
Yeah.
Then I wouldn't ever sort of take an opportunity like you did if I was in that position, because I just would be too stressed about other people. Whereas if it's just yourself, I think it is sometimes easier to make that decision.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, yeah, now I'm in a very different situation because I'm engaged. Like, I own a property.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy now. Like, I'm in a very different position that I was then, but like now there are two of us that make financial decisions. Like, at that point, it was just me, and I was renting, and I knew what I could afford rent wise, and I knew that I didn't really have at that point any like particular big commitments on the cards financially. So it was the perfect time to do it. I know a lot of people end up doing the other thing, which is waiting until they're kind of a bit later on and they've had their young kids and things are a bit more stable at home, in that, like, the other direction, to start businesses and to try it out. But I think that in a way, like, there's definitely a big advantage to doing it while you're younger because you have so much time. And people still say it now, and like, I don't always feel it, but your 20s, someone said to me not long ago, your 20s is for learning, your 30s is for earning, is what they said. And I was like, but I want to earn in my 20s. And there's definitely some truth to that. Like, now is the best time, I think, to try things out and like not be afraid of things going wrong, because you'll always learn something from like a really bad situation. And I'd never want to like wish a bad situation on someone, but we've all had them. We've all had things like in work, in home life, in like relationships not go the way we want them to, but you always come away with it with some lesson of some sort, which helps in the future.
I think that's something that is quite good to hear, particularly for some people who may be in a situation that is quite bad at the moment. Because I know that when you are in those types of situations, it can be very difficult to imagine how life can get better.
Totally, yeah.
But I think, you are a little bit of proof that you can get your life better. It will change.
Yeah, it will. Totally. Like, I guess you have to just not give it up, and you have to believe that it will and that you can do it. I think like one of the words that always comes to mind is like resilience, which again sounds easy to just say it, but it's true. You have to just be resilient when things feel really tough. It feels like things are going against you. Like, don't give in to it. Like, sometimes let yourself have a cry, let yourself feel sorry for yourself, but like, don't do it for too long. Like, get like, have a talking to yourself, tell yourself to get out of like the funk, and just put yourself out there, because I think that one of the biggest things is that we so often are worried about what people think of us and like what things look like from the outside, but really, like, no one's watching you nowhere near as much as you're watching yourself, and people don't really care anywhere near as much as you probably think about what you're doing. And ultimately, if you succeed in doing what you want to do and going out there and putting yourself out there, getting out of your comfort zone, like, people will look at you and be like, okay, fair enough, like, fair play, like, they did that.
I do that all the time. Even when I was reaching out to you to be on this podcast, in my head I was rereading every sentence, like, oh no, will she think this is weird? Do I say this? Let me add something else. Do I need to be super professional? But at the end of the day, if I never took that opportunity, you wouldn't be here right now. And I think you do have to put yourself out there.
Totally. And I think also just think about it sometimes from the other person's perspective, because, I love when people say, do you want to come and chat about this? Do you want to come on here? Like, because I'm like, that's really awesome that like they want to talk to me. I never think of it as like, oh, like who are they? What are they doing? So I think sometimes that can help, especially if you're reaching out to people who you feel like are like doing really well at something or are kind of further on in their career and you want advice. I think just remember that a lot of people will be flattered by that.
Yeah, I've noticed as well that a lot of people, I think, they're doing really well, and I'm a bit like, oh, are they going to give me any time? And they're so happy to give me advice and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really good ideas to put yourself out there and reach out to people who you would kind of be a bit nervous to reach out to, because you actually never know who you're going to meet.
Yeah. And what's the worst that can happen as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful exercise. That's something I used to do I would write down the worst thing that could have happened, and it never happens.
Exactly. And normally when you actually write it down as well, the worst thing, even if it does, is not that bad. Like, the worst thing that probably happens if you send some emails and messages is that people don't reply.
Yeah, definitely. I think, that's really kind of good what you've said. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you want to expand a bit more about how you've sort of gone through tough times, but you've kept yourself motivated and resilient, whether it was a support network you had or it was certain things you did to keep yourself going and be resilient.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah, so there's been like a few pivotal moments, I would say, like in the last 10 years, which have been like really, I guess, tough, where things just have not gone the way I wanted them to go. And I think one of the biggest things, as you just mentioned there, is like the support network. And I definitely think that I have relied very heavily on the people close to me, which I'm really lucky to have been able to do. But I've also been through phases where I've done the opposite. And I think that one of the difficulties a lot of the time is that we as humans, like our instinct is to, I guess, try and put on a brave face a lot of the time. And I've definitely done that a lot of the time. And actually, like, it doesn't ultimately help that much because people can't help you if they don't know what's going on. And unless you're honest with people, and like, this isn't saying, you need to go and shout from the rooftops what's going on or like why you're struggling, but unless you tell people what's going on, they can't help you. And that's something that I've definitely learned, is to be a bit more open and expressive about my emotions and when I'm finding things hard. And especially at the moment, like, trying to set up a business is tough. Like, it's really hard and things don't go to plan a lot of the time. And you constantly feel very exposed. I was actually chatting to someone who is, I mean, she is very well known now, I suppose, online. You probably have seen her account, My Frugal Year.
Oh yeah, I have, and I've listened to her episode on Frankie's podcast.
Yes.
Oh, I love her. She sounds so lovely.
Yeah, so I speak to Claire quite often, and we were having a chat last week about this, and about the fact that when you're building something, like, you feel really vulnerable. And it probably is the same, to be honest, if you're in a new role, in a new office. But especially with the internet, there's something about it that just feels very exposed. And like, I'm sure that you will have seen, like, so many big influencers have had so many issues with being trolled. And there's an element of it that, like, it's part of the territory. It shouldn't be, but it is. But there's always a bit of a fear of putting yourself out there, that it will come back to bite you. And I think that is something that I have really found difficult, I think, to get, like, to come to terms with, and all of the emotions that just come with trying to build something which is relying on you, that's like your face at the front of the brand. Like, that was never what I imagined that I would be doing. And so I think I've learned a lot, that I need to be communicative with people about how I'm feeling. I need to be open about how I am emotionally, like whether I'm feeling strong, whether I'm feeling weak, whether I need some support. And I've also, I guess, been quite intentional over the last few years around finding people in my network, or expanding my network to people who can support me, who understand what I'm doing, and like the challenges that come with that. Because up until like probably last year, really, pretty much all of my friends were employed, and being self-employed, like, was just a foreign thing, and none of them really understood. So I've had to, like, really try to expand my network and my, like, friendships, really, to people that do understand it and that can support me when I'm feeling like it's all going down the pan.
Yeah, you've said so many amazing sort of nuggets of wisdom there that I just like to pick up on. But just for a little context as well about My Frugal Year. So Claire, she found herself in a lot of debt, and she started an Instagram account where she sort of was showing her success. That's right, isn't it? I don't know if I missed out anything. But
yeah, so she started the account towards the start of last year, and she was £27,000 in debt, and it was anonymous, the account, and she documented her kind of journey with being in debt and trying to get a hold of it. And she finally, said who she was in, I think, March maybe this year. But has continued to kind of keep talking about it and then document her journey paying off the debt, and has just really helped to open the conversation around the shame and the emotions that come with dealing with debt.
For sure, I think a lot of people, you kind of overlook the emotional side of money, but it is definitely there. And you've said something as well about expanding your network and, you know, increasing your sort of like the friends you have. And I think that's quite interesting because I do think there is a sort of side, once you've gone to university and you're like an adult, it's a bit like, wait, so is that it? How do you make new friends now? Because
Oh my gosh, totally. Like, I mean, I just laughed because he said an adult, and I'm like, I'm not sure. I've got to this point now where I'm not sure that I will ever be an adult. Like, I think that maybe that is just a mysterious, like, myth. Um, but you're totally right. And I definitely thought that. Like, I left university and was like, okay, I'm done now. Got my friends. And I get it. Like, I totally do. And the thing is, like, I still, like, my school friends, my uni friends, like, I love them to pieces. And I still spend quite a lot of time with them, talking to them, like, they are, like, my foundations. But you change a lot in once you're out of university. Like, when you're at university, you all have a shared experience. Like, whether you're at different universities or the same, you are going through a very similar process and a similar life. As soon as that ends, things like start to go in different directions, and you will all start to go down different paths, and you'll move and you'll do different jobs and you'll take on different responsibilities, and you'll get into different relationships, and your priorities will change. And this, like, I mean, it sounds like it's all like massive stuff. Like, it's just natural stuff that will happen. And I think that until it happens, you're kind of like, oh no, nothing will change, it will be the same. But that's just not like the reality. And as things do change and you like start to build your career, or you start to make decisions about where you want to live, like, you realize that, like, maybe you do actually need other people. And I guess the other thing that I always thought was that the people that I met later on, like, I just wouldn't be as good friends with, because they'd have their friends, I'd have my friends. And that was just not true either, because some of the people that I've met in the last year have, like, changed my life. And, like, are some of the best friends that I have. Like, they have helped me with business, they've helped me with personal things, they have, like, given me the confidence to do what I'm doing when I've doubted it. Like, they understand the highs and the lows. And to be honest, like, the only reason that I have, like, met these people is because I kind of got really uncomfortable with and just asked people to meet up. I just got, like, out of my comfort zone, and I was like, I need to do this, so I'm just gonna ask the questions and go for the awkward first coffees, and see what happens. And that's what happened. It's like, you will meet awesome people. So yeah, like, adult friendships is a weird one. And I think what I've realized as well is that there will be phases throughout our entire lives where we, like, need new friends, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't mean that we're replacing our old ones, but, like, you know, there will be things like you'll change job, or you'll change city, or you'll become a parent, and, like, at each stage, like, you will need a different group of people to support you in that space. And, like, that's totally normal, and actually those people can really add to your life.
yeah, that makes such sense. I think it's just hearing you say it like that, it sort of all clicks, and it's like, actually, that makes such obvious sense. Why did I not think of it like that before?
Yeah, I definitely didn't think of it like that before. And like I said, even, like, a couple of years ago, I really didn't think I would make, like, really close friends as an adult. But I now have realized that, like, again, yeah, like, those friendships are as valuable as the ones that have lasted, like, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I think it's just so true, you know, you never know who you're going to meet when you put yourself out there and go for that awkward first coffee,
Yeah,
because it can just turn into a great friendship.
totally.
And you do have, I think as well, you learn more about yourself as you get older. You don't finish learning about yourself as soon as you finish university. It's not like, okay, that's it, that's who you are.
No. I think, like, your teenage years are very formative, but I think your 20s are also. And I mean, I'm sure everyone will say, yes, so your 30s and your 40s, blah, blah, blah. But I think that there's something about your 20s, and like I say this, I still got 2 years of my 20s left that I'm clinging on to. But like the difference between like my early 20s and now is like so big. I think, and this is just my experience, but I found my early 20s like quite difficult because I didn't really know who I was and what I wanted. I thought I knew, but I don't think I really did. Um, and I think it's taken me like most of my 20s to figure out like what I really value and what I really like want in my life in terms of things like stability and like I don't want like a mad like crazy life. Like I'm quite a home person. I quite like just relaxing and like being like at home on my sofa reading a book. Like it sounds so boring, but um and I think it's just taken a long time to work that out. And I don't think I would have learnt that if I hadn't gone out and like spent all my early 20s partying, which is what I did, and having a great time. But um, I think, yeah, you learn so much because, like we said earlier, you don't have responsibilities in the same way that you do as you get older. But you have freedom, which you don't have as a teenager in the same way. Um, and you start to have money as a 20 something. So it's like the first and only time, like until a lot later, that you have like the freedom of money and like no responsibility.
I can't wait for that. I can't wait to get the freedom of money, finally start earning.
It's crazy. Like I mean, now obviously it's, for me, I'm like, oh, it's so normal. I can't remember those days. But then I go home, and I haven't been back to my mum's house for months at this point. But like I go home and as soon as I walk in, I'm like a child again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have to buy anything. I don't have to buy any food. I'm going to get fed. Like, I'm like, those are the good days.
I think, though, it's quite important what you said about your early 20s because it's one of those things where you have an expectation of exactly how it will be and how you'll feel. You know, I think there's a sort of stereotypical expectation that, you know, you'll have a great job lined up, you'll be living your best life, going traveling or like making loads of money. And sometimes you do that stuff, but you don't really feel that emotional success, if that makes sense.
Yes, totally.
And I think that it's like quite good to hear that it's normal.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think the temptation is when you leave uni, and I definitely did this, and a lot of my friends did this, is to go like, okay, so now we're going into jobs. Like, I want to earn as much money as possible. And like, if that's what you want to do, then like, fine. But it's only when you actually start going down that path that you realize that like, maybe that's not what you want to do. And like, that's not going to keep you fulfilled. Like, you start to realize that like life, I think, isn't as like black and white as it seems before you start earning and before you then factor in all of the other things that come with like the responsibility of having to have a job and like trying to work towards big life goals like buying property and paying for a wedding and all of those things. Like, I think things just become a lot more like on a spectrum, I would say, of like the opposite of black and white. I don't know how to express that, but I think that's like the thing that I have realized through my 20s is that there's so much room for like, I guess, maneuver almost. Like, there's so many variables, there are so many different directions that you can go in and so many different considerations that at the start of your 20s you just don't always have. And also that like your priorities will change. That is a thing. I think, I mean, I probably said like, no, they won't. Like, this is me. This is what I want to do. And one of my best friends is, she's a really interesting case of this because she, throughout school, was like completely like super high performer, wanted to be a lawyer. That's what she was going to do. She went to a very good university, studied law, got a job, a training contract at one of the best firms in the country, did it, got a job, like a permanent job in the team that she wanted, which was the best team in the country for that particular type of law. And alongside this, she also met her now husband at university, and they got married pretty young. Actually, they got married at 24. And so they were just like, having their normal life in London, and she started working long hours, and the hours just got ridiculous. And so she spent 4 years basically not seeing her husband, because she would go to work before he got up, and she would be at home later than he was asleep. And over time, it just like really wore her down. But she had worked so hard, and she was so determined that this is going to be like her career and her path, that like it took a long time for her to like admit that like she was really unhappy, and that like she had done all of this work and put in all this time and effort and chased something that she'd got, and realised that it was nothing like what she had thought it would be like. And so she left, and she now works for a firm which is tiny, completely different. But she also now isn't even that bothered about staying as a lawyer. Like, she's now kind of considering that maybe she doesn't want to be a lawyer forever. And if she does, that she's kind of happy doing it in a local firm or being a lot less high profile, because she never wants to not have her life again, and she wants to be able to enjoy her evenings and her weekends, and she wants to be able to move out of London. And I just keep saying to her, like, if you had told me that this is what you would be like when you were 22, like, you would have literally laughed in my face.
Yeah, I think it is really clear how much, a change in priorities and circumstances can really change what you actually want in life.
Totally, yeah. Like, and there's like, I think that's part of it, is just accepting that you don't know what you're going to want in 5, 10, 15 years, and just working with like the now to a degree, and like not focusing too much on the future.
Yeah, I think that's really solid advice there. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to sort of give any advice you want to give to anyone who just feels a bit down at the moment, that they're, not living their best life. They're just kind of going through that rough patch. Is there anything you'd like to say to someone who just feels a bit crap like that?
Yeah, totally. I think the first thing I would say is like, don't expect too much from yourself, because everyone has those phases. Everyone has periods where it feels like nothing is going the right way, but it won't always be like that. So don't give up, but also do what you can, because there is always something that you can do. And if it's because you feel like you are not in the relationship that you want, or you're not in the job that you want, you don't have the skills that you want, look at what you can do to improve the situation that you are in and the cards that you've been dealt. Like, speak to people, ask questions, message people, email people, take courses, watch YouTube videos, and just put yourself out there. Like, no one is going to question yourself more than you. So I think just don't be afraid of getting things wrong. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. And just remember that people that look like they've got everything sorted, like people that look like they've got their shit together, are often the people that have it least together.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Ellie, and thank you to everyone who listened. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, then message me on Instagram at Hey It Gets Better. What was your favourite piece of advice you got today? I can't wait to hear from you all. So have an amazing week, and remember, hey, it gets better.